Welcome back to another reading and correcting with me, Kindar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. These are where I read a chapter from one of my stories and correct it as I go. If you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch and YouTube. And if you are looking to support me, that is on my Patreon. Today, we are doing Chapter 50 of Stepping Wild. Tibs was surprised when the muscular woman by the door simply nodded him uh, nodded him onward. Nodded him onward before focusing on pulling the rope and raising the large bundle of something containing a lot of metal essence to a man in the rafters. He'd expected to have to justify his presence since Cinta wasn't with him. Inside, it was similar. Those who noticed him as he headed for the door in the wall acknowledged him with a nod and went back to their work. Some were painting backdrops, others talking at each other in a way that felt like practicing, and a pair were sword fighting. One was skilled, the other not. No one even asked where Cinta was. The door to Ismail's workshop was closed, and Tib knocked. When there was no answer, even if he sensed her at the table, he knocked again. "Come in, Thibaut," she called. "How did you know it was me?" he asked once inside. "You knocked. Only people who aren't used to this place knock on my door, and you're the only visitor we get." She never looked away from the work of assembling colored crystals in an earring. "What can I help you with?" "What would it take to turn the medallion into something?" "It's called a crest," she said, opening a drawer. "Turn the crest into something that can fool a noble?" She took a blue crystal that could pass for a sapphire. "I can't make anything that would fool that family." She cut a length of thin metal wire from a spool. "How about fooling another family? One that isn't in their circle, below them in status." She looked up from her work and at him. Her expression remained unreadable. "Then all I can do is get the right material." She returned to her work. "Nothing I can help with when it comes to the enchantment on them." "Enchantment?" He didn't know if his attempt at surprise fooled her, but she didn't react to it. "Yeah, there's something on them that lets the city officials know it's authentic. Came about back when the nobles decided to make their own and started handing them off as payment for favors. And it tells everyone they're real? That would be a problem. Only those who can pay someone who senses magic. There's no way to there's no way even the nobles waste money on sorcerers for something that basic. So low nobles have to trust what they see. Neither to the guard at the university had an element. That didn't mean no one in there would, but he should be able to get in at least." "Yeah. What would you need to make one? Which family do you need it to be from?" "Don't have one in mind. I'm just curious." She snorted. "Sorry. Force a habit. I don't have a specific one in mind, but it needs to be below the high nobles. But high enough." Okay, this is not a but. "It needs to be high, below the high noble, but high enough it would make sense they'd feel threatened by a recently arrived noble courting them." "Is that noble the one you'll be playing?" "No." "Then that noble you want revenge on. Who are they?" He shook his head. He needed to get to work on that, but he still had more important things to do. She worked on the sapphire in silence. "The Atharan family would do. What would you need to make their crest?" She shrugged. "Gold and silver, which you said you'd bring me for the jewelry. The clay and wood for that family comes from one specific merchant. He's careful about his stock, and like I said, I can't do anything about the enchantment." "Where is that merchant shop?" "I'll see just how careful he is." "Ernst," Tibbs greeted the theater tailor from the already open doorway. "You said that as a noble low on funds, I could walk around the city wearing something from your racks. Were you serious?" Were you? The man replied, setting the cloth he'd marked with chalk aside. I might have to. You realize that if you interact with a noble, no matter how low they are, you will be the city's laughingstock. I'm thinking of interacting with common folk. The city's would be nobles at most. The man stared at him. That's not going to help if words get back to those nobles. You won't be able to keep that a secret. Everyone in that party will know. Tibs smiled. Without intending, Ernst had given him what could explain why he'd want to do this. With everyone looking at me, making me the subject of their ridicule, they won't pay attention to the others. Ernst only knew about Cinta being on the team. He didn't know how large it was, or if Tibs would be more than a decoy. The tailor considered something. Even in a situation like that, a noble wouldn't want it obvious the clothing's inferior quality. That means it would be cut to fit you perfectly. How long for you to do that? Ernst shrugged. Once you're measured, it's about fitting the time among my other works. My other work, a few days, maybe a week, since I have a number of costumes to make for the play. Tibs removed his vest. Measure me. Naris stared at him with incredulity. Are you insane? I'll pay you for the extra work. Paying me isn't the problem. You're already doing that enough. You're asking me to break the law. Forging travel paper isn't the same, the man snapped. Those are just claiming you're from some kingdom no one's ever heard of. Credentials paper from the Ataran family affects the people in this city. Do you have any idea what someone can do with those? Getting into the university was all he cared about. Not that he thought it would make a difference, but he couldn't tell the men that. He also couldn't have a way. He also didn't have a way to link those papers to making the master take the blame. So you won't do it. I'm not a criminal, Naris stated. Without him, Tibs would have to steal the papers. Not as problematic as stealing a crest would be, but now he had to figure out the noble situation in the city. The merchant's shop where Tibs needed to get the clay Ismail needed was smaller than he'd expected for a place that did business directly with the city. He was the shabbiest of the few customers, even dressed in the best clothing he could afford. The shelves displayed only small amounts of the materials sold, with a card explaining where they were from, along with prices Tibs couldn't believe anyone would be willing to pay for what were, when he got down to it, artisan supplies. Sliver of wood from more kingdoms than Tibs knew existed, crystal and metals, earth and clays, even water and oils. While he couldn't recreate any of the essences he sensed this would be a good place to compare mixes of material to see how close they came to the earth and clays, water and oils. He found the clay and wood Ismail needed. They were displayed under a case, and while the amount were small, they were large enough each for her to make the crest. But their disappearance would be noticed. Knowing what to sense for, there was more in the back. All he needed now was a way to get in, take some, and ensure no one realized it. Tibs only needed a few days to find out where the Atharan family home was. It would have been faster to ask people directly, but the masters to ask around directly, but the master's people were just about everywhere, and while most didn't seem to pay him any attention, a few didn't take their eyes off him. He could give them the slip, but it made interacting with people unnoticed in the open difficult. He'd taken a few more days to identify them, and now he followed one who had been out shopping. He'd seen her show papers. Now he hoped to sense where she stored them once she was home. Nobles had too many papers for him to be able to take the time to search all of them for the correct ones. He also couldn't slip them out of her robe without her realizing they were missing at some point. The house wasn't as large as the others. In the neighborhood, he sensed her moving about inside, then in a room with a metal safe, and in they went. That night he was in without trouble and avoided the servants on his way to the office. They either couldn't afford or didn't think they needed guards. The safe opened easily with some essence work, and he found the papers along with crests, 5 letters and 5 crests, one for each of the adults. This meant he couldn't simply take one. He studied the papers and inks. He'd known there was no enchantment on them, but he hadn't been able to get a good sense of them among the crowd and moving about. The inks' mix reminded him of bleep. Because it can't be the inks' mix in and of itself because he doesn't have all the elements. What do you sense of the inks mix? You know what? I don't need the mix. What do you sense of the ink reminded him of some of in Naris's bottle, but so it would be of quality as was the paper, but they were they were ordinary otherwise. Okay, you know what? Did I address that? Uh and been able to get close enough to narrow a sense and get details of how they were made. Yeah, that's gonna address. Um, because this is the thing is basically this here. Or better yet, so he need to manufacture a way to explain why it was gone, or better yet, ruined. He returned the paper and ensured everything was as they had been. Uh, I'm giving myself trouble, but I need because this is the thing. Like he's saying, he can't just steal them. Ah, wait. Um, actually, no. You know what? They also couldn't say about that. Actually, that's actually no. That works because it's a different set of problems that he's dealing with. Okay, well that works. Or better yet, ruined. He returned the paper and ensured everything was as they had before. Then left to prepare things. Exchanging the papers turned out to be the simpler part of the plan. The commotion wasn't his doing, and the chaos it caused distracted the master's people as much as let Tibs slip a hand into the noble's vest. Ensuring it was destroyed took more work. He knew where she was ultimately heading from overhearing her making the arrangements the day before, but he didn't know when she'd head there or which direction she'd approach the shop from. He paid people to park carts near it on each of the road leading there. She came from the road with the ale cart waiting for her. The wheel broke when Tibbs willed it, and the barrel burst on impact, showering everyone close by. She was quick, but Tibbs made sure she was soaked. The lining of her vest was oiled, but the pocket with the paper was open. It would seem like an odd series of coincidence. Events. But when she pulled the drenched paper, all she when she pulled the drenched paper out, and all she saw on them was ruined ink and the paper breaking apart under there would there would be an explanation. He walked away with the first item he needed, safely tucked away in the hidden pocket of his vest. Tibbs looked up. The sky was without a cloud, had been so for days now. How could he go about creating a storm? From his reading, he knew it was about an imbalance between the air and water essence, two elements he had. He also had lightning, so he could add that to make it more authentic, but he had no idea how to cause the imbalance he needed, well beyond his reach, to make the storm. Glaring at it isn't going to help, Charlie said. Do you know something that will? Tibbs replied. Without that storm, we can't get the fabrics. The fighter shrugged. We aren't in a hurry, are we? You said your target wasn't leaving soon, otherwise you'd just get ready to follow her and avoid dealing with the master. The theft wasn't in a hurry. Wasn't in a hurry. The theft wasn't in a hurry. He didn't need to hurry for the theft, but he wanted to get started on his research for the job. He on his research. He had the papers and clothing, but he needed the storm to cover up getting the clay and wood. That would work to explain the damaged fabric. What would work to explain the damaged fabric would work even better for the destroyed clay and missing wood. How often does it storm in this season? Charlie studied the sky. Once in a while. We might be due for one, not that it looks like it. He smiled. Come on, let's get you something to drink and a bard to listen to. It'll distract you from all this. No bard, Tibs said, but followed the fighter. Charlie laughed. What is your problem with them? Just don't care for what they sing. They just make matters. They just make up stuff. It's not like they're singing about you. What does it matter if what they sing is real or invented? Who here is going to travel to the land of Forstair and see if Darkness's adventuring band did or didn't defeat the Dungeon of Darkness? They're just fun to listen to. Except that unless someone read books, bards were how people learned about the world, and somehow in their song adventurers always did the right thing. They always helped, stood by those oppressed. Tibbs and stood by those oppressed. Tibbs, a witness that was untrue more often than it was. The tavern Charlie took him to was rowdy. People sang with the bard in a cacophony that made the words unrecognizable. At least he'd be able to enjoy his ale without the song distracting him. The bard finished as the server placed tankards on their table, and Charlie slipped her a coin with a smile. Coins were thrown on the stage, and the man here laughed, raising his lute over his head. Let me parch my throat, and I'll sing you something I've heard about when I traveled through Artheron. He headed to the bar. Isn't that where you're from? Charlie asked. What do you think he'll sing about? Dave shrugged. He was through half his ale when the strings were plucked, and the room grew quiet. The tempo picked up, giving Tibbs an impression of someone running. Let me tell you of a robber of quick feet, the bard sang quickly, and faster fingers of laughter at nobles and guards. Let me tell you of the night runner. For the first time Tibbs could remember, he found himself paying attention. He was curious as to how the night runner's exploit had been transformed, or if they had. After all, he had crafted the character just as he did with Fleet Fingers and all those he'd used in previous cities, right out of Bard's songs. And that concludes chapter 50 of Stepping Wild. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next chapter will be up, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to read this story, it is available for free on Royal Road. If you want to read ahead of that and support me in the process, that is on Ream Story, where we are at least a dozen chapters ahead. And if you are looking to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch and YouTube. Links are in the notes, and with that, I shall wish you a good day.